All right, we're live here with Louie Krumwiede. This is a little project we're working on. It's called an interview with a Dutchmaster. Louie, you're the first subject of our program here, so thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, don't know if that's good or bad, but we'll see how it goes.
So, Louie, you played, I believe, with the Dutchmasters from what, 1958 to 1972? Is that about right?
Yeah, it's close, but I was actually 59 through 73.
Okay. So you pretty much had the era of the 60s covered, which is what we want to focus on a lot today. But first off, tell me, you grew up in Buckley, right? So tell me about where you grew up.
Well, grew up on a farm east of Buckley. That's never got too far away from home. Baseball is king in Buckley, so started out going to local games, playing Little League, that sort of thing, and that's how it all got started, I guess.
So what do you remember going to what was then Dutchmaster Field back when you were a kid?
I don't remember exactly when I started, but I do remember going to games when the field was on the east edge of town, and they called it the Charlie Martin Park, and it had lights, which was unique for the area because downstate Illinois there just wasn't any park with lights. These lights came from the World's Fair in 1933, and Arlie Seymour, from a local guy here, he managed to get these lights, got them on poles, and we had night baseball, and that's when I started coming. I don't remember too much about the night games right there. I do remember going to game. My mom and dad would take me, and I remember my Uncle Hank. Uncle Hank Krumwiede. He was the guy that took took gate. He took the money, as people came, and that was his job. And I remember going to a lot of games out there.
So after Uncle Hank took gate, when did Russ Platt start taking gate, and who was in between those two?
My Uncle Hank did it for probably 30 years or more, probably, and then, Russ Platt followed him and did it for probably about that long too, or a long period of time.
Gotcha. So now you, being a Buckley boy, you went to Buckley Loda High School, right?
That's correct.
Played your high school games on what's now the Dutchmaster Diamond.
Yep, that's where our games were.
And when did you first suit up for the Dutchmasters?
1959. As soon as I graduated, that was the first year I played. Didn't get to play the last first year. We didn't have a lot of games. We only played single games on Sunday, league games. So they had an established team, and you kind of paid your dues before you got a chance to play. We did play night baseball, and I played some night games. Usually played the outfield, which I hated. We had lights there, but they weren't the greatest lights in the world, and so that was what I remember about that part of it.
Were these games part of EI League, or were they a separate league or exhibition games?
The night games were not. They were usually traveling teams that would come usually played on Friday nights, and had some really good teams. I think even the Kansas City Monarchs might even been there, and the Birmingham Black Barons, some minor league teams came in and played. Kankakee always had good teams. I remember them coming and playing, and it was just good baseball.
So those first couple of years, who was your manager on that team?
As I recall, it was Bob Weisenbarn. I'm pretty sure of that. Either him or Virgil Shivey. They were both, equally playing at that time and managing too. So I think it was Bob Weisenbarn.
So Lou, you were a first baseman primarily. Who was the first baseman when you first came in?
Lloyd Keever from Onarga was the regular first baseman. Thing I remember him, he was a slick fielding guy. He was kind of in today's world they call him a showboat probably, but he looked pretty fancy out there, and he was a good player. And I think he probably retired a couple of years after I started, and that's when I got my chance playing first base.
So earlier in your career at the Dutchmasters, you did pitch a little bit.
I did.
And I believe you won a championship in 1960?
No, it was later than that.
Okay.
I pitched a little bit early on, pitched like the Friday night games, and occasionally pitched league games, but I primarily played first base. The year you're talking about was 1965, and we were in a championship game, and we were playing a team out of Danville, and they had won the league championship that year, and they're probably the best team in the league. We got the final game, and Emery Zimmerman, who was our starting pitcher, no, it was Dick Dorn was our starting pitcher, and Emery Zimmerman had come in, and he had pitched relief, and we got to the last inning, and I think we were down by a run, and our manager then, who was Jim Varner, put himself in as a pinch hitter for the pitcher, and he hit a double, tied the game, and we were without a pitcher, established pitcher anyway. So they asked me if I would pitch, which I did, and I went in and got the side out the first inning, and I think I was the first batter up in the extra inning. I think I hit a triple, and next guy got a hit, scored the run. We went ahead by a run, so then I had to pitch the bottom of that extra inning, and although we got the 3 outs, we had a little excitement. There was one ball was hit, a pop-up was hit to the infield, and in those days they said, pitcher back up and let somebody else take it. Well, I backed up and it dropped right on the mound. Nobody else caught it, so we had to get an extra out that way, but we did. I struck out the last guy, and we won the championship. And in those days there were big crowds, and people kind of swarmed the field. And I remember one guy in particular, I think he had a fair amount of money bet on the game, and he'd come over there and he'd start putting money in my hands while I was out there on the field because he was happy. So anyway, that's the thing I remember about that.
Was that your only tournament championship in your career?
It's the only one I can remember. We did not have great teams in the 60s. We were, maybe 500, but we just didn't have the exceptional teams in those days.
So in the 60s, who were your teammates that were most memorable to you? Who do you remember playing with the most?
Well, one of the guys who pitched, seemed like he pitched forever. He was pitching when I started, and he and I retired the same year, was Dick Dorn. Dick Dorn was from Fairbury, and he would drive over, and we would go to the away games together for many, many years with my dad. And he's the one I would remember most. But Bill Weisenbarn, both Bill and Bob Weisenbarn were good players. Bill usually batted lead off, and I was usually batted second, so I watched how he would take pitches and do anything to get on base, and then I did a lot of sacrificing with him on first. I would butt him to second, and that's kind of the way the game was played in those days. He was a guy I remember. I remember the Keever, Lloyd Keever I told you about. He was a real fancy fill-in first baseman. Dick Donnell from Onarga, he was a good catcher. He was a good player. There were just a lot of, and all these guys, most of these guys are from the area. They were local guys or lived in short distance of Buckley, and that's kind of the way the teams were made up in those days.
Now, you won the batting title one year, correct?
I did. That was 1967, I believe it was.
Would you call it your best year as a hitter?
It's probably a career year. It's one you won't forget. Things just kind of went well that year. I hadn't hit a home run, especially at that Dutchmaster Park, which fences are long. I hadn't hit a home run in my life. And the first home run I hit, not only did I get one home run in that game, I got 2 home runs in the same game. And I think I also led the league in home runs that year. And that was unusual because I'm not wasn't a power hitter, but and I led the league in hitting, and that was what you call a career year, I guess.
Now, you were a lefty thrower, but you batted righty.
Yep, that's right.
Which is a little bit unique. So back through those years, who were your toughest rivals? I mean, who was the teams that you always ran up against?
Gifford, Flatville were always a rivalry. Royal always had a good team. There was some teams out of Champaign were usually pretty good. I think of the Champaign Eagles. They were a team that were coached and managed by Wardell Jackson. He was the Mr. Everything at that time, and most of his players were black. They come from city of Champaign-Urbana, and he was a kingpin. He did about everything, including betting a lot of money each game. He would come around before the game, and he'd have a big wad of money in his hand, and he'd bet anybody that come along, and that's just what he did. And I thing I remember about him, he would have a diamond stick pin which he wore on his shirt or on his tie, and he always had that with him. And those are some of the teams I remembered most, probably.
So through the years, what made playing in Buckley unique?
Well, there's lots of things unique about Buckley, and I wrote down a few things that popped in my head. First of all, we have a great ballpark.